Stand Up.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. I've got the great David Rothkopf joining me. Another amazing conversation with him. Always great. It starts at 16 minutes. But I've also got your headlines and clips, news and sound coming your way. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you're doing all right on this Wednesday in August. It's the 28th as I tape this. It's hot AF all over the country here at the end of August. And we're 12 days away from the big Kamala Harris-Donald Trump debate. I'll be hosting a watch party, of course. And yes, Donald Trump is going to do it. He's agreed. He's conceded that he has to show up at the ABC debate, which is great news. I'll get to your headlines and more right now. Starting with international news, Israeli forces rescued a hostage yesterday from Gaza, which is good news. The military announced that it had rescued an Israeli citizen who had been abducted during the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th. Officials said that Israeli soldiers had found him by chance in an underground room during a sweep of a Hamas tunnel network in southern Gaza. Imagine that for both the IDF forces and the guy, the hostage himself. Like, oh, hey, how are you? Oh my gosh, look who it is. That must have been freaking amazing seeing him be reunited with his family as well. Let's go to Ukraine, where Russia extended for a second day a far-reaching bombing campaign targeting Kiev and other cities. In China, President Biden's National Security Officer Jake Sullivan arrived there in Beijing for talks. That should be interesting to see if any reporting comes out of that. In Brazil, wildfires are roaring across the Pantanal, the world's largest wetlands, one of the most biodiverse areas on the planet. Yeesh. Let's come here back to home, where special counsel, this was the big headline yesterday, the special counsel Jack Smith charging Trump in a superseding indictment in the case involving an alleged conspiracy to obstruct the results of the 2020 election. More on that when we get into the sound. Democrats yesterday sued the Georgia State Election Board over new election rules that could lead to post-election chaos in the state in November. The disgraced former president added conspiracy theorists Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard to his presidential transition team as co-chairs of their conspiracies. I don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And more than 200 Republicans who worked for both Presidents Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain signed a letter endorsing Kamala Harris for president. For her part, Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz announced they'd be sitting down for an interview with CNN's Dana Bash on Thursday. And the nonpartisan group Cook Political Report shifted North Carolina's presidential race to toss-up from lean Republican. So it's no longer lean Republican now, it's a toss-up, which is huge news as Vice President Harris narrows the gap with the disgraced former president in North Carolina. Also, in health news, Eli Lilly announced that it would start selling low doses of its weight loss drug Zepbound in vials at a far lower price than it does its pens. So that could be good news for people who benefit from it. And I thought this was interesting for students returning to school. And a growing number of districts and school states, they're facing tight restrictions and outright bans on cell phone use as evidence mounts of damaging impact persistent connection to the internet has on teenagers. I wonder if that's happening in your state or school district. In Los Angeles, the second largest district in the country, the school board voted in June to ban cell phone use. And then in Nevada, in Clark County, where I'll be on September 8th to the 14th, the district there will require students in middle and high schools to store phones in pouches during the day starting this fall. Several states, including Indiana, Louisiana, South Carolina, Florida, have enacted legislation limiting cell phone access during the school year during the day. And governors in at least 3 other states, including Virginia, have called on states to restrict or ban the devices. Other states have provided funding to support restrictive policies, and I want to see how that works out. It's well intended, but what will be the outcomes in reality? I'm super curious. So is that happening in your school district or your state? Let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com for that one. All right, those are your headlines. Let's get to the sound I gathered for you. Let's start with something fun. This is about 2-minute interview that Tim Walz did with this guy called Kareem Rama. He does something called Subway Takes. He does these quick interviews, and it was really good, really funny, really humanizing and relatable, which is exactly the kind of thing Tim Walz should be doing, the kind of media they should be doing. I loved it. You'll love it if you haven't heard it. Here it is.
So what's your take?
My take is the most neglected part of home ownership is the gutters. It's personal for me.
100% agree.
I've had problems with gutters before. You get your basement wet, you get ash dams, cause a lot of problems.
It's not good.
No, it is not, but there are fixes. Now, the other dangerous thing is that when you live in Minnesota, fall's a great time of year, a lot of leaves. You got to get up on a ladder.
And they get stuck in the gutter. The leaves get stuck in the gutter. I've seen many a man fall off the ladder.
Many a man, seriously.
Many a man fall off the ladder.
But there's a fix. You can put a gutter helmet over the top of it.
A gutter helmet?
It covers it. It lets the water go through, keeps it out of your house. I see this all the time.
How often do you like looking at gutters?
I look quite often, surprisingly, because I kind of judge it. I try not to be judgmental on people, but when I see a well-tended gutter, it says a lot about somebody. So,
what's better, a well-tended lawn or a well-tended gutter?
I'd go with the gutters.
100%. There's no doubt in your mind.
No, I think gutters are a big thing, that they really matters.
Where do you buy gutters?
The downspouts I bought at Menards.
Save big money at
Menards. He's exactly right.
That's not how. That's not.
No, I know you're right. I'm not getting.
You gonna leave me hanging like that?
No, you're right. You're right. Okay, you ready?
3.
Save big money at Menards. And keep your receipts, 11% rebates, but you got to send them in. It's a little bit of a challenge, but keep your receipts. You send it in. About 6 weeks later, you'll get your 11% back.
These are great takes. And you believe that cheese belongs on the inside of the burger.
I know this is very controversial for folks, but it's
not controversial.
Not for where you come from. You've been on Juicy Lucy.
Doesn't everyone agree?
I
have a song called Juicy Lucy, by the way. You can play it at your house.
You do?
Yeah. I'll send it to you right after that.
Why did I not know that?
It's a deep cut.
It's a
just like the burger itself. They're delicious.
I do believe it should be inside.
It's like a hot chocolate molten lava cake, except beef and cheese.
He knows his Minnesota.
Yeah.
He knows his Minnesota well.
All right. A lot of fun. Really enjoyed that. But the big news yesterday was about the superseding indictment from Special Counsel Jack Smith, which is an attempt to adhere to the Supreme Court's presidential immunity decision without showing the prosecution's cards in an evidentiary hearing, a.k.a. this mini trial. Jack Smith working very hard to preserve his case and move expeditiously. And now here's how it sounded on MSNBC with Alicia Menendez, breaking news yesterday, and the great legal analysis of Lisa Rubin, who I love.
Because we have some major breaking news. Special Counsel Jack Smith has just filed a superseding indictment in the federal January 6th case. In a statement, the special counsel says, quote, "Today, a federal grand jury in the District of Columbia returned a superseding indictment charging the defendant with the same criminal offenses that were charged in the original indictment. The superseding indictment, which was presented to a new grand jury that had not previously heard evidence in this case, reflects the government's efforts to respect and implement the Supreme Court's holding and remand instructions." Let's bring in MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Lisa, what more can you tell us?
Well, Alicia, I can tell you a couple of things. One is that the Department of Justice, or rather the Special Counsel's Office, in bringing today's superseding indictment, didn't change any of the actual charges against former President Trump. They remain identical to those on the original indictment, which was filed a year ago, or more than a year ago at this point, in August of 2023. But we are already seeing, just in comparing the number of sheets of paper, the original indictment was 45 pages long. This is 36 pages long. And so I expect once we start doing this page-to-page comparison, we will see the places where they have taken out allegations in order to try to comply with the Supreme Court's ruling. And in particular, one of the things that I expect will be missing here are allegations about former President Trump's interactions with Department of Justice officials. That is one concrete area that the Supreme Court hit in its July opinion, saying that his discussions with folks at the Department of Justice about whether or not there was election fraud and what they should do about it were part of his core constitutional duties for which he was entitled to absolute immunity. That is perhaps the only area that they gave clarity on. The others, they gave sort of contours about what he would be immune for, what he wouldn't be immune for. But that is one where they gave precise guidance. And so I would expect to see that cut out of this superseding indictment.
All right, well, we'll know a lot more from legal experts like Lisa Rubin and friends of mine on the show that join me in the days to come, but seems like a pretty slick move by old Jack Smith. We'll see what happens. All right, well, this clip got dug up and played last night around the internet, and I saw it on MSNBC because Tulsi Gabbard is going to be on Trump's transition team, former Democratic Congresswoman. She ran for president back in 2020, and during the debates when there were still like eight candidates left, this is what it sounded like when Kamala Harris ate Tulsi Gabbard alive in front of a national television audience.
Our Democratic Party, unfortunately, is not the party that is of, by, and for the people.
Senator Harris, any response?
Oh, sure.
I think think that it's unfortunate that we have someone on the stage who is attempting to be the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, who during the Obama administration spent 4 years full-time on Fox News criticizing President Obama.
That's
who
ridiculous,
has spent full-time,
That's
who
ridiculous.
has spent full-time criticizing people on this stage as affiliated with the Democratic Party. When Donald Trump was elected, not even sworn in, buddied up to Steve Bannon to get a meeting with Donald Trump in the Trump Tower.
Yikes. Clean up on aisle Tulsi Gabbard. That was brutal. All right, now let's go to Joy Reid on MSNBC last night, who explained why Democrats are suing Georgia. This seems like a boring but very important development.
With just 70 days to go until Election Day, Democrats are making a big play for the Peach State. Tomorrow, Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz will kick off a bus tour across southern Georgia, followed by a solo Harris rally in Savannah on Thursday. But while the Harris-Walz campaign is focused on mobilizing voters, Donald Trump appears to be returning to an old strategy, laying the foundation to potentially contest the election results. And a trio of allies who sit on Georgia's state election board are making it easier for him to do just that by recently adopting new rules on certification that critics warn could cause election day chaos. One of those rules allows officials in all 159 counties to make what they call reasonable inquiries before certifying election results, but does not specify what exactly a reasonable inquiry entails. The other allows county officials to examine all election-related documentation before certification. Well, now the state and national Democratic parties are suing the election board over those rules, claiming that the board is giving local officials a broad license to hunt for purported election irregularities of any kind, potentially delaying certification and disenfranchising voters in a state that could decide the election.
Yes, indeed. So we'll pay close attention to that, and I'll get people on to talk about it. All right, my final clip that I want to share with you is the great Trey Crowder. Anytime he does one of these rants, I always just love it. He's so good. There's almost nobody better at this style of ranting and comedy than he is. And follow him and support him. And every time I see one, I'm like, I should reach out to him. I know Trey. He's been on the show a whole bunch of times, and I'd love to get him back, and I should. Anyway, here it is.
All right, let's do a little roundup. RFK Jr. finally dropped out of the race. I guess there's only so many deeply unsettling mutilated animal corpse scandals one campaign can withstand. I guess last week his team was like, sir, it may be time to withdraw. We hear there's another animal scandal coming. Was it the thing with the camels on the yacht that time? Because that was the Sheik's idea. No, it's about, what did you do to the camels? No, it's something about a whale. Oh, One time, a man goes all Leatherface on a beloved sea mammal in front of his 6-year-old in order to feature the skull as the centerpiece of a shamanistic blood ritual. One time, and that's a story? They only care because it's a whale. I decapitate dead land animals all the time. Nobody cares. Could you define all the time, please? So anyway, he had to drop out, and beforehand he called the other campaigns asking about a cabinet position, and Kamala didn't return his call, presumably because there's no such thing as the Department of Lunatic Bullshit. Although then again, apparently Trump was like, we were just looking for a Secretary of Lunatic Bullshit. Welcome aboard, sir. So he endorsed Trump, which presumably will boost his numbers with the coveted people who think the moon is up to something demographic. On the other end, there's a new scandal every day for Tim Walz, too, each one more made up and innocuous than the last. They have no idea how to attack this man. They're like, yeah, this rural Midwestern Army vet football coach, happily married father of 2 is bad for America. Is what? Yeah, he's secretly Chinese. His tacos are dumb. He says dogs are his dog. It ain't his dog. You're like, whoa, you guys okay? You all right? What are you talking about? Right? Like, I love how they tell on themselves with Walz. They're like, look how his son loves him. Gross. Every man knows you're supposed to resent and fear your tyrannical father, right? In America, right? Right? They tell on themselves. They're like, listen, we'll find something on Walz. We just got to keep digging because we all know that everybody has at least one deep, dark secret that would ruin their life if it came out. You're like, no, not everybody. I think a lot of people are just paying their bills and going to PTA meetings. That's good to know about you guys, though. It's good to know that prominent Republicans got so many skeletons in their closet, there's barely any room left in there for Lindsey Graham. Right? What are they going to say about Tim Walz next? They're like, sir, we had a solid source here claiming that the tomatoes in his garden were, quote, pretty disappointing this year. Might want to run with that. Right? Meanwhile, you ain't even got to do any research to make JD look bad. Just turn on the camera, let him exist in front of it. My God, what kind of hillbilly don't know how to bullshit around at a food counter? Man, you know what I mean? Just ask them what they know good. You're in Georgia, bring up the dogs. Go in on Florida. It ain't that hard, man. He has the worst political instincts I've ever seen. Somebody gives him a baby to kiss at a rally. He's like, a baby, yes. And how long has this been a baby? Good. And what about you, sir? Do you own a baby? You're 16. Okay, good. This has been an enjoyable human interaction. Right? They're so weird between him, Trump, and now that old Bobby Bear Killer's on board. They're like the Avengers of being off-putting. Meanwhile, on the left, you got the political Ted Lasso out here warming hearts and changing minds. What a time to be alive. Love y'all.
All right, Jay Crowder, everybody. Always love it. So good. So very funny. I'll definitely try to get him back on the show. All right, well, now it's time to get to my guest. It's David Rothkopf, everybody. Today on Deep State Radio, you can read him every day at the new Substack that he's launched, Need to Know. We love it. And follow him on Twitter. Always a great conversation with David Rothkopf. Let's do it.
It's just like the editors of the New York Times. What?
Everybody's going nuts about Rich Lowry's piece about
what an idiot. I'm writing a Substack about it. I don't know.
You're that.
I don't want to give up my best lines. But no, there's a certain point where you're like, oh yeah, they're both siding this thing too far. This is adding a nude girl on page 3 of the New York Times. It's like they don't care about, they just want to get a certain kind of reader, and they don't care about anything that happened before, journalism or anything else.
Boy, it hurts to see it because I think there's so many great reporters there, and I like having a subscription, but everybody is just going nuts today about that. What do you make of it? New editors, losing money, clickbait? What is it? What's the strategy?
I don't know. It's just every day. 2 days before, there was like, joy is not a strategy. And so, wait a minute. We just watched this convention. Everybody was going crazy. Kamala Harris has worked the most remarkable political turnaround any of us has ever seen in our lives. In a month, she's shifted the polls 10 points, raised $540 million, gotten 200,000 volunteers, and they're like, this may not be working. She better sit down for an interview with us. That's what it's going to take. And it's, oh, God. Get over yourselves.
I wanted to talk media with you because I love what you're doing at Need to Know, and you've got a great piece over there. But before I get to all of that and what you've been writing about, I just want to ask you 2 questions I don't think you have written a piece about. I'm sure I saw some tweets. First of all, just the thoughts on where we're at with the war in Ukraine today as we speak here at the end of August. There was a major bombing on civilian infrastructure. Obviously, Ukraine has made inroads in Russia, which maybe we thought we would never see. Where are we?
I think we are where we've been, which is it's pretty close to a standoff. The Russians make some gains. The Ukrainians make some gains. Now, having said that, 2.5 years ago, we would have thought that Russia would have conquered Ukraine in 3 days. So the fact that Ukraine is more or less intact, with the exception of the parts in the east that Russia claimed a long time ago, that's remarkable. And that is a huge achievement, and it speaks to the courage of the Ukrainians. And the fact that they're making inroads into Russia, that's really impressive. But I don't think from a strategic perspective that the conditions on the ground have changed dramatically. And barring some unforeseen development, it looks like this kind of stasis is going to continue.
Let me go then to the Middle East and what's happening in that tinderbox, because that seems so many analysts are predicting it could blow up. And now it would seem that between Iran, Israel, Hezbollah, and their proxies and their supporters, everybody is there obviously been attacks. There's been missiles. There's been planes. Fighters left Israel and went into Lebanon. But what do you make of that situation and how it seems to be, I don't want to say contained, but how would you describe what's happening there, not to mention the negotiations?
It's hard to talk about it and not mention the negotiations. The reality is both Hamas and the Netanyahu government have posed real obstacles here. But I think if we're going to be fair, the bigger obstacles have come from the Netanyahu government. They have sought to say that they're baseline for the deal a number of things that the Palestinians will never, ever accept, which is ongoing Israeli occupation in Gaza or the right of Israel to go in whenever it wants to, which is not exactly a ceasefire anyway. But until we get to a ceasefire, we're not going to be able to resolve sort of any of the other issues in the neighborhood. And conversely, I think it's been the theory of the Biden administration that once we got to a ceasefire, then we would be able to dial back the tension with Hezbollah, with Iran, with the Houthis, and so forth, and perhaps even move on to some kind of a normalization deal with Israel and Saudi, and be able to say, okay, there's enough incentive for everybody to keep a lid on this thing that they will do, and then turn our attention to the rebuilding of Gaza. The problem is, as we have said many times, even here on the show, if this war ends, so perhaps does the political career of Bibi Netanyahu. And so he doesn't really have a big incentive to bring it to a close.
And I think that takes us to the reporting. I don't know if is this accurate reporting that Trump is on the phone with Netanyahu saying, don't make peace because that'll hurt my that'll hurt my chances to win? Is that reporting accurate? Is that real? Because if it is, that reminds us of what Nixon and perpetuating the Vietnam War. But I just can't think of a more insidious thing to do, a more evil thing to do. Keep the war going for my political chances.
First of all, there's been no hard confirmation of that. Okay. I think most people have concluded and been talking about it ever since Judy Woodruff on PBS made a mention of it a few days ago, and she's walked that back a little bit, saying it hasn't been confirmed. Is that the kind of thing that Trump would do? Absolutely. Would it be a violation of the Logan Act, which everybody in social media has mentioned? The Logan Act says you can't run an independent foreign policy from that of this country. Has the Logan Act ever been enforced? Not in any real sense. I think twice in a small sense. Would it be unprecedented for Trump to do it? No. You mentioned Nixon. There's also the case of allegedly people associated with the Reagan campaign suggesting to Iran to hold onto the hostages until after the election. And there's some evidence to back that up. A guy, a Middle East expert back then who worked for Carter named Gary Sick once made a pretty compelling case for that.
What's his name just wrote about that. Steve Cole in his new book. There's some new reporting on that, I feel.
Yeah, these are credible people. It's not unheard of. People do anything to get into power. And for Reagan and for Nixon, getting into power was driven by ambition. For Trump, it's driven by existential needs, the desire to stay out of jail, the desire not to lose his freedom or his fortune, because the only way that he's going to be able to preserve the life that he's had thus far is by claiming this election. Whether he wins it or not is another matter.
So, again, before I get to your latest at Need to Know, which is so good, I just got to ask you
It is. Why is it that you have some listeners who have not signed up for my Substack?
I'm not sure that's true. I've checked in with most of them.
And they've all signed up?
Well, right now, I got to get back to 2 people, but 11 of them have told me they have.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, all 13. Thank you to all 13
Very
of you.
kind and generous. DavidRothkopf.substack.com. Let me just, before I get to it though, Elon Musk, any late thoughts on him? I'd just like to say the name and see what happens to you.
I'd start to fulminate and splutter just like everybody else, but I think I'm not the right kind of person to offer an opinion on Elon Musk. I think that would take a proctologist because he is one of the world's biggest assholes.
Okay, let's get to it then. Why do I I've always been a fan of your work at the Daily Beast and before that, obviously, but why do I like what you're doing at Need to Know Now? Are you unleashed? Are they longer? What is it that I like so much? Can you tell me why it's different? Or what are you doing differently than, or maybe you're not?
I'm not. It's what I write at the Daily Beast. But the thing about Substack is I have to write one every day.
Do you do
it's a little bit therapeutic. It's a little therapeutic. I write 5 a week, right? And couple weeks I've done 6. And it has sent me skyrocketing up the list of the posts on Substack. I checked today and I was number 188. It's pathetic. But I'm writing every day and hoping that people will sign up and trying to bring some insider perspectives from Washington and maybe a little sense of humor to this and maybe purge some of my anger.
188 sounds good, seeing as that there's 2 billion people doing it. So I'm pretty impressed with that. That's top 1%.
It doesn't feel good to me if I know the top 20.
Well, you're one of my to talk to and to read, and I love it. Let's get into it because I thought this piece was really interesting. Suicide or Murder, examining the slow death of the mainstream media. Little by little, they lose influence and die. The question is why? A simple answer. There's other choices.
There are other choices, and I don't think they get what's happened. We know that most people don't get a hard newspaper as they used to. That most people, I used to work for these things called magazines. Do you remember them?
I still get the newspaper on the weekends, and I get a couple magazines delivered. I like it.
Yeah, but you're old school. The reality is most people don't do that. The vast majority of people in the United States get their news from online sources, social media sources. If you're under 40, it's 85% of the people get their news from these sources. I actually, in that Substack, have the link to a Pew study that talks about that. 5% of people consider it very important to get their news from print media. Which is the same number, by the way, as radio. So the paradigm that we were exposed to before is just over. And it's this debate. Kamala Harris should talk to the media more. It illustrates that because these media people feel they're very important. But Kamala Harris has been visible to everybody, not just for the past 4 years, but since this campaign started, all day, every day. She talks to people in crowds. She talks to people on different forms of social media. She talks to people. She's talked to the press sometimes on her plane, which by the way, they don't mention that she often will go back and talk to the press on her plane. She talks but she's not doing it on their terms. And it's driving them crazy that she's having a ton of success without doing this. And of course, a lot of the media are now playing a partisan role or are promoting disinformation, which makes them less reliable. And a lot of consumers are more comfortable being in a kind of echo chamber with their friends, which is not necessarily a good thing, but that's where it's gone. And so this campaign, just a final point on it, I think a week ago, the Harris campaign announced that they were going to spend $370 million on media advertising. $200 million, the majority, was going to be spent on social media, on online media. 170 was going to be spent on TV. It used to be TV was the thing that determined whether you won an election. It's not anymore. This election will be won or lost on Instagram, on Facebook, for the olds, on TikTok, on YouTube, on YouTube. And
Utop is not a website I suggest people go to. Some people should go to it, but not everybody.
I don't even just for tops.
I go to you.
It depends on what you're looking for. Yeah, you bought them. I know. Yeah.
Good luck coming back.
So, yeah, I'm coming back from that. I was going to pitchers and catchers, and I'm just going to leave it alone. The reality is it has changed before our eyes, and this election is going to demonstrate that. And I think, part of the thing that's elevated the Harris campaign so far are, memes, the Brat Summer memes, those kind of things. And that has churned out young audiences in ways that no policy statement possibly could.
Right.
Because it says she gets it. She's communicating to me in my language in a way that I can relate to and understand.
It would also seem that the new media is overwhelmingly created by young people who know how to make those videos, make those memes, and those people are more likely to be supportive of Kamala Harris, and they're doing some pretty good anti-JD Vance and anti-Trump media as well. Some of the videos and memes that they're making up that make fun of those guys are very effective for young people to see how outside the mainstream a guy like JD Vance is.
Yeah, true. But let's give credit where it's due. The Harris campaign, like flipping a switch 5 weeks ago, said, yeah, we're going with it. Let's roll with it. Let's change the tenor of this thing. They put out press releases that are actually funny.
Yep.
They have decided to go after Trump and Vance by diminishing them with humor. They have kept the spirit of the thing alive. And it's different from anything. Have you seen it? Any campaign that had this kind of vibe before?
No, it seems courageous and risky, except for the fact that it's so effective, it would seem. So maybe it's not. It's working in a way that no one ever even thought it could. And I think a lot of it had to do with the candidate, but obviously a lot of it has to do with the thinking around the candidates.
Yeah, I think true. A lot of the people on the campaign were people who were on the Biden campaign.
Right.
But Kamala Harris and her team came in and they said, no, we're going to do this a different way.
Yeah.
And they deserve all the credit in the world for that.
You deserve a lot of credit because you've been writing about her. You've recognized her talent for a long time. You're probably the least surprised guy when you saw her give that speech the other night. And I just want to get your overall take on the DNC, and then we'll go to the aftermath of it all, which you've written about. You watched all 4 nights. You were there. You were scolding those of us who were criticizing the speech of one Leon Panetta.
That was directed at you, particularly.
I knew it. I felt it.
I saw you were making fun of Leon Panetta. I was like, hey, dude, slow your roll. This is a real guy who has done remarkable things in his life. He stood up there. He gave a great speech. He put national security at the center of this, which nobody expected would happen. And he totally crushed the other side. And this is a guy, Leon Panetta, who led the Budget Committee in the House, became the White House Chief of Staff, ran the Office of Management and Budget, was the Secretary of Defense, and was the CIA Director, and was played by James Gandolfini in Zero Dark 30. Leon Panetta has had a career unlike almost anybody I can think of, and you were making fun of him.
I felt sure. It feels so good to know. I was hoping it was me. But I'll say, fine, I can criticize Leon Panetta, but I wouldn't, not that night. Here's my thing. This is all I'll say. Wrong time slot for Panetta. That's all I'm saying. It was getting late, a little long in the tooth, and here comes Panetta, yip-yapping away. Great, everything you said, but what are we doing with him on the final night? Let's go. He's a Tuesday night.
But I'll tell you something. First of all, I'm not surprised by how the convention went. You're absolutely right. I'm not surprised that she's been knocking it out of the park since the moment she had the chance. I've seen her up close in person multiple times over the course of the past several years. And not only was she great from the beginning, but I've watched her grow. And everything that she is doing is exactly what people who have been close to her knew she could do and knew she would do if given the chance. But having said that, on that final night, again, this was very canny. They had Leon Panetta. They had Adam Kinzinger. Her speech made a number of critical foreign policy points. She addressed the issue of the Middle East. She addressed the issue of support for Ukraine. And I think that was done not just because those are important issues to do, but because they're trying to form the image of her. And it's very important that people understand that she is ready to be the commander-in-chief, that she was on the Senate Intelligence Committee, that she's met with 150 world leaders, that she played a central role in some of these critical decisions. And so I thought it was smart. This was not a time for fluff. She kept the mood up. And I thought her remarks were, one of the things that I wrote for the Daily Beast, was that this convention was Woodstock or Lollapalooza or Live Aid or something of political speech giving, right? Because you had great speeches every single night. the Obamas, and Hillary Clinton's speech was great. And the people who had survived, women who had survived the abortion travails, the people who had survived gun violence, the rising stars in the party, the Wes Moores and the Gretchen Whitmer, they were all great.
Yep.
And somehow, and Tim Walz was great. And somehow you get to the end of this thing and you're holding your breath. Because it's like, is she going to be able to sustain that? But, there's 50 opening acts for her and they're all hitting it out of the park. How does she get on that stage and she did it?
Yeah, she sure did.
She did it because she connected with the audience, and she did that thing that all performers know how to do, which was she started a little low, she started a little intimate, she started a little bit warm, and she built and built to a really powerful punch at the end of the thing. And I could tell, I was watching it and I was thinking, oh, she's leaving herself room.
Oh, yeah.
She's moving up. It was expert.
It was expert. I love, as I've been doing stand-up for over 20 years in front of every type of audience you can possibly imagine. You got to know your audience. You got to know the room. And all week, people were criticizing some who didn't realize that you're on TV and in the room. Play for the TV and all the things we always hear. The pauses, the inflections, all of it. Kamala Harris covered it all. And I just remember the best tweet I had that night. It wasn't smart. It was just from the, an experienced performer's point of view was, at the very, about 3/4 in, I go, here it comes, because I was referring to the build. Like exactly how you knew she was going to go is how she went. And my dad said, I wasn't a big fan. I'm obviously supporting her over Trump because he fucking hates him. But he said, I wasn't a big fan of Kamala Harris, but after that speech I am. Like won over my 80-year-old white Italian dad and a lot of other people as well when they saw her speak. She did what she needed to do to win over people, at least who were watching it, who weren't finally there, is my take.
I think that's exactly right. And, you're getting to something which is small and a lot of people won't notice it. But if you go back and watch the speech, she knew to wait for the crowd reaction.
Oh, yeah. She knew everything.
She knew how to play it. She knew when to follow along with the chant. She knew when to move on to the next thing. She had that sense of the crowd. And yeah, sure, they were all there for her and they were eating out of the palm of her hands. They were set up for her to be successful. But she didn't let anybody down. And at the end of it, you thought, oh, no, she should be the president.
Yep.
This woman should be the next president of the United States. There was one other thing she did in the speech that I mentioned, your tweet of the night, my tweet of the night, which was my throwaway tweet. I didn't really think about it a lot, was I said I was struck by the fact that nowhere in the speech did she mention breaking a glass ceiling or being the first woman president.
Why not?
And I think it's because we've moved on. And thanks to the work of Hillary Clinton and a lot of other bold, successful women, we are now 8 years past that. The most powerful political figure in Washington for the past 8 years has been a woman, Nancy Pelosi. And we've seen this all change. And instead of running and saying, I'm going to be the first woman, she's just running. She's saying, look, I'm ready. I've done these jobs. I know how to do this stuff.
Showing, not telling on that measure and a lot of others. All right, before I let you go.
And I thought that was super compelling.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a really good point, too. A really good point. Finally, I think it's your latest piece over at your Substack, which if people aren't following and supporting and with a paid subscription, I think it means you're going to have a long winter. It's called Navigating Bullshit World. How do we keep the fires of the DNC burning when so many seek to douse them with torrents of crap? And you've documented all these examples from Lindsey Graham, others. But my last question is, tell us a little bit about your angle on this piece, because we are post-DNC and between now and maybe a debate.
Yeah, no, there'll be a debate. Trump needs the debate. She wants to debate him. She will eat him alive.
Yeah.
Go back and look at her debate with Mike Pence.
She's a prosecutor.
She's a prosecutor. She's got a very, very good communicator. She will call him out on his nonsense. But it goes back to this point we started out with the New York Times. There are all these people who think it's in their interest to unleash these torrents of bullshit to try to bring her down a little bit. And they can't bring her down with the truth because she's doing great, right? And Walz is doing great. The Democrats are doing great. So how do you do it? You make shit up, and Trump makes stuff up. And, we get into debates over. Tim Walz said that he won an award from the Chamber of Commerce, and it was actually the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And,
right.
and how could they make that mistake? And There are these columns and articles, certain kind of things. There's Russian disinformation. There's Iranian disinformation. There's the stuff that people like Lindsey Graham just make up, where he said there was no war in Ukraine when Trump was president. Yeah, there was, actually. It started in 2014. And he said he would end it with a phone call, but he didn't do anything about that then. There was peace in the Middle East when he was no. There wasn't peace in the Middle East when he was president. There was actually fighting going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, primarily in the West Bank. There was a war going on in Syria. And remember, we launched a missile that killed Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general. There was a war going on in Yemen. It's nonsense. He said that gasoline was $1.87. First of all, the average price of gasoline during Trump's term was closer to $2.60. Secondly, if it ever reached that low price, it was because the economy collapsed during COVID.
Yeah.
And nobody was leaving their houses.
Hiding in our houses. I didn't want to touch my car door handle. I thought I had COVID on it. I didn't want to touch the gas pump.
It was absolutely an insane thing to man, deeply misleading to bring up. The reality is, pre-COVID, the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, the price of gasoline went up. The final point he made, he said the border was secure. Well, fewer people are going across the southern border now than were going across the southern border at the end of the Trump administration. So how do you get through this? Well, one, you've got to be a critical consumer of information. You've got to know the facts or go to people who are going to give you the facts, like you, Pete, and others. But the other thing you've got to do is keep your eye on the prize. Keep focused on what it was that was inspiring last week, what the ultimate goal is, what the ultimate risks and threats are, and not get caught up in this welter of crap.
I hope they take your advice. We take your advice, and I hope everybody subscribes to that Substack and, of course, to Deep State Radio. I so appreciate your time whenever you join us, and I most appreciate direct shade on Twitter. I felt real important.
I didn't mention your name.
I knew who it was for, and it felt good.
I didn't mention. And by the way, there's some other people who are mutual acquaintances of ours who are on Twitter, and I just don't mention them by name, but I do go after them because, they say another one of the bullshit items. I'll just mention this in passing before is people were saying all the people who wanted Joe Biden to leave wanted an open convention. And they're trying to say that they didn't want Kamala Harris. And if we had only known they'd wanted Kamala Harris, we would have supported the idea.
Yeah.
What a load of crap.
Right.
What a load of crap. And I have it in writing. I wrote this
nobody played it better than you,
right?
My friend. Nobody played it better than you. You get all the flowers and credibility for how you played that and how you've been covering her for years as well. You have done great work and deserve. I think that when people do a good job, they should get credibility. That's how things should work. And when people do a bad job, they should lose credibility. It's not the way the world works, but it's the way the world should work. And it certainly is the way I see things, which is why certain people I don't talk to as much anymore.
Yeah, I think and there's a high premium on the Jack Webb, Dragnet approach to all of these things right now, which is just the facts, man.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Always great. And there you have it. David Rothkopf. Listen to him on Deep State Radio. Subscribe to his Substack. Right now, it's Need to Know. Go look it up. All that's in the show notes. And I will talk to you tomorrow, where I believe my guest will be Amanda Jones, who you may have seen making the rounds on media. She was on MSNBC yesterday. She's got a great new book, and she's an amazing person. And unfortunately, we have too much in common, being attacked by crazy lunatics in our town. Her new book is That Librarian, The Fight Against Book Banning in America. She will be my guest tomorrow on Stand Up. All right, you bumblebees. Love you. Talk to you then.
That's the time you gotta finally get up on your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window. eager to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.